Good evening, respected ones. In this video, I am going to discuss the contemporary Indian education question paper for the Kannur University first semester examination of 2019. I'll be discussing the questions for 2 marks and paragraphs in this video. I'll be discussing the essay questions as separate discussions later. So the first section is for 2 marks. The first question is, what are Makthabs? For 2 marks you can write only the points or only a few lines, 1 or 2 sentences. So what are Makthabs? Makthabs were the primary educational institutions during the medieval period or Islamic period in India. In Makthabs, reading, writing and arithmetic together with recitation of Quranic verses and prayers were taught. What do you understand by midday meal program? Midday meal program is a program introduced in India for providing nutritious food for all the students. This program was intended to attract the parents so that to ensure that all the children are reaching schools and continue their education till the end of elementary educational level, because some students tend to drop the schools just because they are not able to pay attention towards the teachers because of hunger. What is the role of teacher in Vedic system of education? Vedic system of education gave more importance to character development and knowledge attainment. So the most important role of the teacher during the Vedic age was to provide as much knowledge as possible and to be a role model for the students to get a better character in their life. What is meant by discrimination? Discrimination is the process of treating 2 sections of a society in a different manner. That is, to give some privileges to some sections of society and denying such privileges to another section of society only because they belong to that particular section of society. Expand UNESCO and UNICEF. UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. UNICEF, United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund. It was first United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, but now it is changed as United Nations Children's Fund. If you write one of them, you will get the mark. So you have to write United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund or United Nations Children's Fund. What is alternative education? Alternative education is the education given to some children out of the traditional formal educational system because of the factors such as some students will not come to the mainstream educational system, and some people believe that the mainstream educational systems do not provide any opportunity for creative learning and practical learning. State the importance of Preamble of the Constitution of India. The Preamble of the Constitution of India mentions the aspects such as secularism, socialism, democracy, dignity of each individual, and so and so. This is important because for a nation like India, all these values are inevitable for its smooth and better development as a democratic country. Write a note on Nai Thalim. Nai Thalim means education and work are not separate. Mahatma Gandhi's educational concepts are known as Nai Thalim because he emphasized the importance of providing a work experience in between the formal educational system so that to make the students able to stand on their own feet by the end of the completion of the elementary education. Write a few words on cultural pluralism. Cultural pluralism is the state of a society in which the minority groups are enjoying their rights to follow their own beliefs and customs, and the majority groups are accepting some elements of the culture of the minorities. List the objectives of SSA. There are different objectives of SSA, that is Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. First one, ensure that all the children reach school by 2005. Ensure that all the children remain at school itself, that is retention, by the year of 2008. To ensure that all the children complete elementary education by 2010. To make or to take special measures for giving education to the children who belong to the backward communities who are residing at educationally backward blocks. To provide funds for building new classrooms, new toilets, and for other facilities. So these are the 10 questions included in the first section for 2 marks. Then comes the paragraph questions. The first question is write a short note on issue-based pedagogy. So you have to give different points. Issue-based pedagogy is not a pedagogy introduced by Paulo Freire, but it is influenced by critical pedagogy of Paulo Freire. So we can start with Paulo Freire's concepts. So you can just write the paragraph just like this. Issue-based pedagogy is a pedagogy used all over the world nowadays by getting influenced by critical pedagogy introduced by Paulo Freire, one of the greatest educational philosophers the world has given birth. Paulo Freire was against the so-called traditional formal educational system. He criticized that the traditional formal educational system always sees the student or the child as an empty bank account and according to Paulo Freire, the traditional formal educational system sees student as an empty bank account and teacher as a person who has to deposit all the information into this empty bank account. As a result, a student in a traditional formal classroom always is forced to sit passive by listening to the lectures given by the teachers without having an opportunity for expressing their own views on different contemporary issues. And Paulo Freire called this state of passiveness of the students inside the classroom as culture of silence. And Paulo Freire added that such a culture of silence will be continued even when these children are becoming grown-up ones, and they will never respond against any sort of social injustice because of this culture of silence. He also told that students are oppressed ones inside the classrooms. He wrote a book called Pedagogy of Oppressed, in which he told that students who are forced to listen to the lectures of the teachers inside the classroom without getting an opportunity for expressing their views on contemporary issues. So he told he was going to introduce a pedagogy for these oppressed ones, that is the students, and he called it Pedagogy of Oppressed. And he told that students should be considered just as grown-up people who have got their own views, their own visions and their own feelings. So instead of filling the bank accounts, empty bank accounts, teachers have to present before them the contemporary issues and let them think about such contemporary issues by using their reasoning power and logical thinking capacity, and they can provide the solutions for such contemporary issues. This pedagogy is called critical pedagogy because it allows students to think critically about the contemporary issues. It's also called problem-posing education because the teachers are presenting the problems, the contemporary issues before the students. And later, educationists all over the world created something called issue-based pedagogy by getting influenced by critical pedagogy of Paulo Freire. In issue-based pedagogy, students are given some issues related to the society, even when they are learning different subjects, and they are requested to think about such contemporary issues in a critical manner by using their reasoning power and their capacity to have logical thinking about different problems. So this is issue-based pedagogy. Next question is, describe the concept of UEE. UEE means universalization of elementary education. Universalization of elementary education is a concept which was put forth even before independence in India. It was first put forth by Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi was publishing some articles on his thoughts on education in a weekly called Harijan. And his educational concepts were discussed by Congress, and they prepared a report under the chairmanship of Zakir Hussain. The educational concept, the educational scheme is known as Varda scheme of education. In Varda scheme of education, you can see that Mahatma Gandhi was advocating free and compulsory education for all the children between 7 and 14 years old. Later, Sergeant Plan, the last educational commission report before independence, advocated or recommended that all the children between 6 and 14 should be given free and compulsory education. And when India got independence, our constitution had got a directive principle in the form of Article 45. Article 45 tells that all the children between 6 and 14 should be given free and compulsory education. As a directive principle is only an instruction towards government, no one can go to court if government is not ensuring the item included in a directive principle. So, with an amendment in the constitution in 2002, education was included as a clause in the Article 21A, so that to make education a fundamental right. So now it is a fundamental right, and it tells that all the children between 6 and 14 should be given free and compulsory education. And for this universalization of education, different governments have introduced lots of programs and schemes. For example, you can see midday meal program as a program which was introduced just for attracting the parents, so that to make them send their children to schools thinking that their children would get some nutritious food at schools. Moreover, midday meal program was a program introduced just for ensuring that there is no wastage and stagnation because of lack of nutritious food for children. Similarly, in 1986, you can see a program called Adult Education, which was introduced just for giving literacy, functional literacy for those people between 18 and 35 who hadn't got any sort of education during their childhood days because of some factors. Then in 2001, Vajpayee government introduced a scheme called SSA, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, to ensure that all the children are getting education. All the children between 6 and 14 will be getting free and compulsory education. And in 2009, the UPA government passed the Right to Education Act, which came into existence or into effect in 2010. It is known as the Right to Education Act of 2009-10, and it made this education for children between 6 and 14 something legally implementable program. So all these things were done just for this universalization of elementary education. But still, if you look at India as a whole, then you can see that most of the children are still out of the range of this education because of a number of factors. Question number 13. What are the major recommendations of Kothari Commission for promoting women's education in India? Actually, this question, I think it should not be there for a paragraph question. Because Kothari Commission did not recommend a variety of programs for women's education. But still we can look at something. Kothari Commission was a commission which was studying the educational systems in India. It was formed in 1964 and they submitted their report in 1966. As a result of this report, the Indira Gandhi government declared a policy, educational policy, a national educational policy, but it was not successful. So the Rajiv Gandhi government declared a new educational policy in 1986. It is known as New Educational Policy. And see, Rajiv Gandhi government's this educational policy declared some programs for women. As the policy was a result of the recommendations given by Kothari Commission, we can say that these programs were some programs recommended by Kothari Commission for promoting women's education in India. Rajiv Gandhi government's new educational policy introduced a program called Mahila Samakhya program. So we can consider it as a recommendation of Kothari Commission. So the Mahila Samakhya program was a program intended to bring women folk to the mainstream of society by giving them opportunities for expressing their views on different aspects. Mahila Samakhya program was a program intended for making women folk come together to indulge in some activities as a group in the society. It also declared that Mahila Samakhya program, as a part of Mahila Samakhya program, women should be given a chance to be the part of educational administration by being selected as one of the member of the administrative committees of different educational institutions. So, it was a recommendation of Kothari Commission to give opportunities for women folk to come together, to join together, to be a part of collaborative activities in the society, to get opportunities for being a part of different social institutions, different organizations, and even of the administrative committees of educational institutions. Kothari Commission also recommended that there should be special measures for giving education to girl children of backward communities from backward blocks of societies, educationally backward blocks of societies, and such a recommendation was implemented by Vajpayee government in 2001 as a part of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. So you can just write these points as the answer for this question. Discuss the objectives of colonial education in India. Colonial education means British education. Colonial education is the education which was prevailing during the British rule in India. They have got different aims by education. Though they reached in India during the first part of 17th century, that is 1600, they hadn't started giving education to Indians till 1757, before they got the power in India. In 1757, they captured the power in India after the War of Plassey. Then they needed lots of people for their office works. It was not possible for them to bring a large number of office workers from Britain. So they started giving education to Indians. The first aim of colonial education was to create some office workers for making their rule more smooth and systematic, because they were using some modern administrative methods for ruling the country. The second aim of education was to spread English education in India. Macaulay told that all the people in India should learn education in English language because it is the language of the rulers, and moreover, Indians were eager to learn English. So they believed that by spreading English language in India, they can bring modernity into this country. Another aim of education during the colonial period was to spread European culture and literature in India. Just look at the words of Macaulay. I want to create some Indians who are Indians in blood and color and Europeans in their culture. They believed that European culture and literature are more superior than the Eastern culture and literature. So one of the aims of education during the colonial period was to spread European culture and literature in India. Another aim of education, and this is something hidden. This is something hidden aim of education, to divide and rule Indians. Macaulay recommended downward filtration theory in India. And according to downward filtration theory, there is no need for giving education to the mass, but we can give education to only to the elite people, and the education will be filtered down, or it will reach the downward classes, because downward class people always like to imitate the upper class people, and it was just for dividing the people into two groups, and they always utilized this trick for continuing their power in India. Then another aim of education during the British period or the colonial period was to spread science education in India. They brought science education to India, modern science. So they just wanted to make the people keep some scientific temper in their day-to-day life. Another aim of education during the colonial period was modernization. They brought modernization to India. They used modern aspects of life, modern instruments, modern weapons, modern techniques in all the walks of life. So they just wanted to make the people modern in India. So these are the aims of education or the objectives of education or colonial education in India. Write a paragraph on education as a fundamental right. So I told you that education was not a fundamental right in the Indian Constitution. Now let's look. When India got independence, most of the people were not educated because of the faulty educational visions of Britishers. They wanted to divide and rule, and they introduced downward filtration theory, and they just gave education for the upper caste people. Their principle was that when the upper class people were given education, the downward class people would try to imitate them. But the matter was that the upper class people were not ready to provide the education they had got to the lower class people. So when we got independence, most of the people were not educated. And because of this fact, the creators of our constitution just included a directive principle under the title of Article 45. And it told that all the children between 6 and 14 years should be given education free and compulsory. All the children should be given free and compulsory education. But it was only a directive principle. A directive principle is something like an instruction given by the constitution to governments. And if the governments are not ready to implement these items, no one can go to court. So, as an amendment in the constitution in 2002, education was made a fundamental right. It was included in Article 21. A new clause was added, that is 21A, Article 21A. According to Article 21A, education is a fundamental right that each and every child between 6 and 14 should be given free and compulsory education. And once it became a fundamental right, if the governments are not ready to facilitate elementary education for all the children because of some reasons, or by looking at the social and cultural status of some children, then anyone can go to court and ensure the right is given. And as a part of this fundamental right, in 2009, the then UPA government passed a law in Parliament by making education a legal right. And this law is known as Right to Education Act of 2009-10. And in that law, so many articles are included. For example, a student can demand for TC at any time in an academic year, and similarly a student can demand admission at any time in an academic year. A student who hasn't got any sort of education can demand the admission for a class which is on the basis of his age. For example, if a child becomes 10 years old and if he hasn't got any sort of education in his life, he should be get admitted in 4th standard or 5th standard. So different rules are there, and 25% of reservation is therefore even in self-financed educational institutions for those who are coming from socially and economically backward communities. So education is a fundamental